The NBA Finals is over, and the San Antonio Spurs is going home without a championship ring. Now, I know that there's a lot of talks about what's going to happen with this team in terms of what is their future looking like. A lot of people think that, this is probably could be one of those situations where you go to the finals and you might not ever go back again. I mean, we all make the joke about Chris Paul saying that, he was a little bit addicted to going to the playoffs and then he never made it back to the finals ever again. But is this the same case with the Spurs? And I think it could be if they don't fix a few things that I think might holding back the team. And the first and foremost, the most important thing that's probably holding back the team a lot, to me, in my opinion, is Wemby. Wemby is a dog. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to downplay or downsize what he does. He's honestly like one of the best defenders you'll ever see. His impact is not going to be quantified by blocks all the time. Matter of fact, his impact is about the many shots that people just simply don't take around him. But for me, what I've seen this whole playoffs, but really in the finals and in the series before, is that Wemby just needs a little bit more muscle. He is being like plastered and tagged by guards, and that's stopping his momentum going down to the paint. And if that is the way to stop Wemby, of course they're just going to do it. And so what they did to kind of counteract that is by running more horns action, by running more Spain pick and rolls. However, when you add more people into the mix, you can still get tagged. And so it's really difficult for Wemby to be a very proficient pick and roller if you don't really need to put a big on him to stop his role. And so it's very a difficult situation for a guard perspective because your bread and butter for the whole season is the fact that Wemby could get to the paint and create that advantage and you can lob it to Wemby. However, because he's not strong enough, you had people specifically like Jose Alvarado. He was instrumental throughout this whole final series by tagging Wemby and stopping Wemby essentially in his tracks, allowing enough time for his main defender to get back on, whether it be OG Anunoby or Mitchell Robinson or Karl-Anthony Towns or whoever. They was able to get back on him because one person could really stop his momentum, and that's because he's probably like 7'5", 200 and maybe just 200 pounds, and that simply is just not good enough for him to be a prolific pick and roller. He needs to gain more muscle so that he can kind of shrug off people. When you see people like, Joel Embiid, for example, he's big enough where if he goes for the pick and roll, he's going to run over a Jose Alvarado. And then they give him the ball. I mean, that's easy money. That's easy chicken. But if you're not going to, let's say Wemby says, because he mentioned before in the past that he's not going to build more muscle, he wants to build more strength. And I can understand that perspective. However, I do believe that the muscle will work. But if you're not going to build more muscle, one of the things that Wemby has to do is that he has to develop a floater game. I mean, of the floaters, if you are watching this whole playoffs, the floaters are there. Now, I know it's not as efficient as getting to the basket, but if you are simply not going to gain muscle and gain some pounds on you so that you can kind of bulldoze your way to the basket, well, then we need to figure out something in the mid-range, because the mid-range is definitely something where he could survive and he could thrive in. We see a lot with, let's say, specifically Joel Embiid. We see him just thrive in the mid-range. He's a really good pick and roll slash pick and short kind of guy, short roll kind of guy, where he can get the ball on the free throw line and then he'll make his free throw shot. And it's pretty simple. It's pretty easy. You don't always have to get it to the basket. Now, I know this might be counterintuitive because you don't want a guy who's like 5,000 feet tall to be further away from the basket. But then now we need to figure out, okay, well, if he's not going to get into the basket, well, how else can we make him effective? Because when it came to him running, one-on-ones with Karl-Anthony Towns or Mitchell Robinson, you see that if he couldn't get past them on the first dribble, a chest-to-chest bump is just going to stop Wemby, and then he's going to, revert back to like a spin or a half spin to see if he can get some type of space or momentum. But it's just simply not going to work all the time, and that's why his efficiency was really, really down. And so Wemby needs to at least gain a few more pounds, or at least unlock like a floater or some type of mid-range arsenal so that he doesn't have to, one, of course, deal with the physicality of always getting through people, but two, unlock a different level of your game, because now if people have to play up, well, then that also unlocks the paint a lot more, not only just for Wemby, but also for his teammates. I also believe that there's a few more things that the San Antonio Spurs need to do And one of the things is that the coach really needs to rethink his process on the players. Now, I know De'Aaron Fox, and I'll get to De'Aaron Fox a little bit later, is a big sore spot. But I think from a coaching perspective, we have to think about the fact that De'Aaron Fox was having a very, very tough playoffs just in general. And part of it is because he sprained his ankle. He's not going to be as effective. He's not going to be as fast. But also, he just wasn't being able to make shots. And when you have Stephon Castle, except for the last game, and Dylan Harper, who can give you really, really good minutes, you kind of have to just roll with the punches. Roll with a Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, Julian Champagnie, Wemby, and Dylan Harper on the court for as long as you possibly can, because that's going to be where you're going to kind of get the best you possibly can get from those starters. But I also believe that, it takes a lot more than just, getting downhill and getting to the basket. I believe he should empower his players to take a lot more middies, because I believe that a lot of the times when they were really like shrinking the paint on Wemby, especially for Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper, they were taking very, very tough layups. Now, I know Dylan Harper had a really good last game in the finals, but for me, you don't kind of want to live with just taking very, very tough and difficult layups. When contrastly, you have a lot of easy, wide open free throw shots just right there in the midi. And that's what the New York Knicks really, really hedged their bets on, is that these guys, they're not trying to take middies. They're not trying to really explore the three levels of the game. They're trying to get to the three or the basket. And, usually that will work if you have a very prolific three-point shooting team, which they do in terms of Devin Vassell, and Julian Champagnie. Keldon Johnson didn't have a great series either, really just a great playoffs at all, and he needs to really reinvent himself and figure out what he can do to help the team. But they don't really have the greatest shooters on the court outside of Julian Champagnie and Devin Vassell. And so you're obligated to use more of the second level and towards the paint as well. But if they're shrinking the paint to stop Wemby, well, then we need to figure out, well, can we just take more middies? And also from another guard perspective too, and this is more so coaching than anything. I think of it like this. When you see Wemby in the paint, right next to the rim, and he has, let's say, a guard on him, or even a forward. Let's just say somebody that's less than 7 feet tall. If it's a matchup thing where you don't want to throw it or lob it against OG Anunoby, I completely understand. But essentially, Wemby is sitting there wide open. Like, he's literally wide open. He has his hand up, and especially he has the arm bar on the back of the other guy, and he's not strong enough to really get offensive fouls so that, he doesn't push off. And so you just basically just throw it up. And I think that there are only three things really that will net a positive response if they just throw it to Wemby. The first obvious is that Wemby will make the shot. The second is that if Wemby misses the shot, he's quick enough and long enough to get his own rebound and put up another shot. And the third, which is I think is easier, is that they're just gonna have to foul him. We've seen this a lot of the times when Wemby was rolling to the basket and they actually did lob it. If it was a really good pass or a decent pass, that the Knicks had to foul him. And what does that do? That puts a lot more pressure. That puts a lot more pressure on everybody, because they understand that if Wemby keeps rolling and get past our second level of defense, which means that we're going to have a very tough time stopping him to get like easy dunks or easy layups. And so we're going to have to foul him. But that puts a lot of people in foul trouble. But for some reason, the San Antonio Spurs guards, they just don't see that. And it's so weird, because you had a guard like Chris Paul in the prior season where he was able to just throw it up, lob it, no matter what, is simply a great passer. And I feel like that's something that they should have learned to consistently do, is say that, listen, it is kind of weird. You're not necessarily something that you trained for all your life, to see a 7'5" guy with a crazy wingspan throwing his hands up and almost already be at the rim. But this is your teammate. You have to make these adjustments and just simply just throw him the ball. Just literally throw him the ball. It is wide open. It is there. And if it's not there, most of the time you're not going to get a turnover. You're going to get a foul, or you're going to get Wemby, who's going to put up a shot. He might miss, but he's going to get his ball. He's going to get the ball back. And so it's really, for me, it's frustrating. It's extremely frustrating watching that the whole playoffs, because Wemby is essentially wide open on many shots. And then when you're not taking middies, now we're just making bad shots or tough shots. And it's like, do you really want to live with that? And then, we already know. De'Aaron Fox, he has a problem. Not necessarily, I don't believe that he will be a problem in the sense that like he won't play better. I do believe that his injury definitely hampered his ability to be a scorer or be quick as much as he usually is. But of course, he made very bonehead decisions and bonehead mistakes. But for me, what is very difficult when I think about De'Aaron Fox is that, what does that mean having De'Aaron Fox on the team while also having Dylan Harper and Stephon Castle? Do you want Dylan Harper and Stephon Castle to be a shooting guard or point guard? Because if you want to develop one person to be a point guard, well, then they need more touches. And if I were to say, let's say we have Stephon Castle, who has, took over the point guard role whenever De'Aaron Fox was not on the court, well, then he needs to have more touches. And so does having De'Aaron Fox growth of the other guards that's on the team? I think it does. And I think it's something that they're going to have to address. Now, if Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper can become very prolific guards in terms of point guards, and really it's not that hard, just throw Wemby the ball, then maybe we don't have that much of an issue. But I do believe that, especially with the Spurs, it was more so a win by committee. Everybody has to play their parts because of how Wemby demanded so much attention. And when De'Aaron Fox is simply not playing well, shooting 3 for 15, 1 for 8 for 3, and a lot of these shots were wide open shots, man. I cannot believe that even with an injury, he's still not able to make these wide open shots. And so I think that the Spurs has definitely a window, but that window is as long and has a vast longevity as long as Wemby is on this team. But also, he needs his guards to play better. He needs De'Aaron Fox to play better. He needs to play better. He needs to unlock the midi. He needs to gain a little bit more muscle. Devin Vassell, Julian Champagnie, in my opinion, they played practically flawless, at least from the offensive end. And then, you need your guards to become better, better in the mid-range, better facilitators. Everybody needs to be better. And the coach, and this all comes back to the coach, he needs to also be a better coach. He needs to put his players in better positions. Now, I do understand that being in the finals is very tough, but at the end of the day, one coach outcoached the other, and that was Mike Brown. And if you want to win a championship, you're going to have to outcoach the other coach. And Mitch Johnson, he did it all the way to the finals. He just didn't get it done this time around.